Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Planning Board of the Village of Dobbs Ferry on Thursday evening, January 9, 2020. That sounds funny. At 8 p.m. in the Village Boardroom. Welcome to those people here in the room and to those people watching on TV and that will be watching later at the rebroadcast. We have 4 items on our agenda tonight. We do not have minutes to deal with, so I will go to item number 1, 23 Manor Place. It's a public hearing for site plan approval for proposed new driveway.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as far as I know, we did a very, very thorough review at the last meeting. My engineer supplied a 60-page water management, paper on a simple paving of the driveway, and she addressed all of your concerns that you had up on the board. And in fact, she addressed all of the village engineer's concerns in a detailed point-by-point bulletin, and we requested on numerous occasions in joint emails for any comments that he had, and there was none. We had nothing for weeks and weeks and weeks. And George just happened to hand me something the night of the meeting when he's had 3 weeks to review this, and I found that outrageous. So, and it's completely unprofessional. So, I can't imagine what his concerns are, but the engineer's been waiting for weeks for anything that he has to comment. And I think that any of the meeting is completely inappropriate. It's from a professional standpoint. Especially since I've been waiting 3.5 years to approve it, pay my driveway. If the board has any concerns, I'm happy to address them. I think we really covered everything last time, really in depth. There's been site visits by the whole board on my property, and very candid, transparent. Everything's been explained to just pay under of it. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Let me first deal with the comments that Mr. Palmer had.
Yeah, they're actually follow-ups from the previous meeting, and there was a lot of actually verbal comments that were given in the last meeting that weren't addressed. But the applicant, prior to the meeting, he received the comments, and then he immediately addressed them right away. Usually, you get one bite at the apple. You don't send something in and then respond to it. You put your best effort forward, you review it, and that's it. So that's always been the approach. That's what we use, because just what he's done in the past, we submitted something, and he's got all these responses, and then we have a discussion, and there's more to discuss, and those items weren't addressed. So that's why we try to give it. We don't give it, a week ahead, so you can sit there and you can talk about them, you can go through them, but you give it your best shot. So that's the approach. Because otherwise, we're reviewing things 2 or 3 or 4 times, and we never do that. So otherwise, the process goes on and on and on.
Well, I think that you have gotten the comments that he has on the construction of the road, the driveway, and the implications for that. That's one thing. I think that can be dealt with as part of any approval. We can make it subject to satisfying those things. So that's not an issue in terms of our moving forward or backward or whichever way. I think the more interesting thing that we've been discussing all along, and certainly aware of all along, is where the driveway connects to the exit point out to the other road. And that's less clear because you're going over the unmarked road there.
And that was clear on the diagrams that you received and reviewed. I'm happy to answer it. I'm very familiar with it. Are you talking about the off of the village public road where I made 90-degree turn, go up my driveway.
Right.
What is the part that's unclear?
Well, it's a question of whose property it is and how that should be determined and what implication that has for somebody wishing to use that property.
Okay, so, look, I mean, from a legal standpoint, I know the attorneys, the village attorney and my attorney had discussions on this. There was case precedent regarding village-owned paper road and accessing your driveway from village-owned paper roads. And it's done all throughout the village. So the answer to the question, I think that is more, it's pretty commonly accepted with Dobbs Ferry, and it's a matter of law, is that your road gives me access to my driveway. Your village paper road gives me access to my driveway.
Well,
As
not so fast. Hang on a second.
As does Mr. Healy's.
Not so fast. So the issue is how that paper street came into being. We know that the paper streets were demapped several years ago, but we don't know we don't know how they've been disposed of. So if they've been demapped, under certain circumstances, they automatically devolve to the adjacent property owners. But that's as to half the road. So you wouldn't have the full benefit of the entire road.
Right, but that only occurs through a legal court
No.
proceeding. It's not an
No.
automatic procedure.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
That's not correct. It depends upon how the paper street came into being. If it was part of a subdivision, if it was dedicated or not. All these paper streets may have different origins, and that's something that has to be worked out and confirmed for this particular piece. Frankly, for all of them throughout the village that were demapped, because, again, some may have automatically devolved to the adjacent properties, and some might not, in which case the village would have to convey them.
Right, and in the case, I think, in this one, and I've been before the board here 6-7 times, but on this case, it was part of the original subdivision, and that's clear on the 1920s maps, the 1930s maps. It's there. I mean, it's there for all of you, public record.
Yeah, I don't have that public record.
Well, I'm just saying, look,
Yeah.
I mean, prior to you, it was all given to the board, all of that information was definitely given. It had to be, or we would never be here at this point. But it's on the original maps, and that's right in Westchester County records. Anyone can pull that up. As probably, and in fact, most of your paper roads were part of original subdivisions. And they just never were dedicated, and Dobbs Ferry decided not to take the responsibility and pay for it.
Right, but if that's the case, then only half of this road is available to you.
That's not the case.
Well, how could that not be the
I'm
case?
just saying, in the case precedent that my attorney sent you. in
That
none
was
of-
useless because it didn't reference this issue.
It didn't reference,
It didn't reference the disposition of the property at all. Those cases he sent to me, I'm familiar with, and they talk about how to demap. It doesn't talk about the results of the demapping.
all right, so, I mean, my former attorneys, Keenan Bean, who were well informed of this and represented Dobbs Ferry on the Home Depot matter, they're very, very in-depth, have in-depth knowledge on the matter. And they presented it to the former village attorney about this very topic. So this was never an issue, and if it was an issue, we could have addressed it. I would have gotten you whatever case precedent you wanted, and we've been available to.
Your attorney was here last time, and he said he was going to send me that documentation, the case precedent, and the
And
case
you're saying-
precedent, it's worthless. It doesn't mean anything.
Okay, so.
It doesn't address the point.
I'm just hearing about this now. I had no
Well,
idea. I mean, it's
That was
been 3.5
December.
years.
No, that was this in December.
Right.
I wasn't here 3.5 years ago.
I mean, 3.5, it was about 3 weeks ago, right, since last week, 3.5 weeks ago.
That's right.
Exactly. But no, that's, if that's something you need clarity on, we'll get it for you.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not an issue.
No, I think we do need clarity on it.
If you
That's
need
exactly
clarity
right.
on it, that's fine. But, I mean, that's what,
And if you'd like to have him call me tomorrow,
what's up?
if you'd like to have Mr. Amir call me tomorrow, that's fine.
Yeah, no, definitely, absolutely. But, so, I mean, so the position, I thought we were gonna be meeting here today to hopefully progress this further so I can pave my driveway. But you're telling me at this point, you just need clarity on that issue? And that's pretty much, once we get that, we should be, is there anything else that was present for the board? Just so I can get a sense of where we are with this.
I think the other issues,
Is this a public hearing?
yeah, I'll open the public.
Oh, okay.
The other issues revolve around comments, engineering comments in satisfying of the village engineer.
Okay, and was there anything specific from village engineer that was problematic, or it's something more of numbers and facts that needed to be revised, or water flow calculations, George?
I think the comments are pretty straightforward and addressable,
Okay,
so I don't think there's something that can't be addressed, but I think what was said earlier about ownership of the property and conveyance and all that with the right-of-way, I think that's
but that's a legal issue.
Right.
That's not an engineering issue.
correct.
But from a legal standpoint, was there anything pertaining to the village code in your comments that needed to be addressed? That's code related and reference what code or law that we're not complying with, and they won't be supplied?
Yeah, well, some of the things that, and you can read through the comments, your engineer provided some information that said that slopes were 9%, they were actually 11%. And some of the other, some of it's just cleanup
Okay,
and technical issues, some clarity. But like I said, they're technical comments and they can be addressed,
okay.
so
All right, so nothing overwhelming from your standpoint, from what you see?
they can be, they can be addressed, yeah.
They
they're
could be
technical.
addressed, they're all addressable issues. So that's positive. Correct, so they were minor technical issues.
Well,
So the only issue really is to get clarity, to assist the village in how to handle the disposition of these paper roads, mine and all the rest. I mean, you're kind of asking me to do some heavy legal work for the whole village.
No,
I mean, kind of.
no, I'm just asking you to address it for your lot.
Okay, but this addresses it for Meadowlark.
No, because all those lots aren't in the same subdivision,
Right.
which is what you just said before. So I need, for this application, your information on the street that goes perpendicular to Temple.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
That's all I need.
Right, it's a paper road, just like any of the other paper roads throughout the village. Correct. So if we get this addressed, it's kind of addressing how to handle a lot of the paper roads in Dobbs Ferry, fair assessment.
Depending upon their origins.
depending upon the origin. Okay. If it's a subdivision similar to this, it would pertain to that. All right, that's what I'm saying. So I'm going to be assisting, Dobbs Ferry, and I'm fine with that. I'm happy to have my attorneys do that. But I think it's a little bit of a heavy burden to put on me, but I'm going to help assist with it.
There's no choice. It's,
Well, no, I have no choice, but it's like I'm doing the legal work that should have been done quite some time ago for a big village issue with any paper road.
it's not, there hasn't been a need to in this, there has not been a need to do that. So your application triggers the need to understand this better.
Well, there's other, what I can do is send to the village attorney some other applications that are off your paper roads that have gotten their driveways and garages approved.
Not interested,
What's that?
not interested.
Why is
I'm
it?
interested in your lot,
I know, but why would that be?
because you don't represent those properties, and those properties aren't before this board. I want the background, as you said, to provide clarity on the origin of the paper street that you want to use,
And I'm going to do
which
that.
is part of your application.
Right.
So just concentrate on that.
I understand, but I think in all fairness, if there's other driveways in existing subdivisions that have old paper roads in them, that have recent approvals for their driveways, I think it's very, very pertinent to this, because why would those be approvable in the same circumstance as mine, and mine's not being approved, and they were before the board for their applications, and they didn't go through? If you follow where I'm going with this, it's pretty clear. You don't.
I do follow, but it's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant that one of my neighbors in a similar subdivision got approved.
It's irrelevant to
Same
this
circumstance.
application right now.
What's that?
It's irrelevant to this application. Tell me about your paper road. That's what I want to know about.
Right, but in all fairness, we should all be treated
In
equally.
all fairness,
That's all I'm saying. We should all be treated equally. In all the subdivisions, it's all over. And I looked at that for you. I just wanted to make that point. And I'll have my attorney prepare that and include other driveways that have been approved off your paper roads in recent times, within the last 24 months. And I think you guys should know.
Whatever you wish to do, that'd be fine.
That'd be fun, okay?
This is a public hearing, I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Are you? Do you have any more?
No.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone public that wishes to speak?
Steve Sudak, 23 Highland Avenue, Dobbs Ferry. I'm a 25-year resident of the village. I live directly south of the subject property. I had other issues that I was going to talk about tonight if you were going to move towards a resolution. As the conversation is still centered on the paper streets, I would just, would like to give an opportunity for the village attorney to become familiar with the vision plan, which was adopted in 2010. The vision plan is broken up into neighborhoods. The neighborhood that we're considering right now is the Knoll. That's where this property is located. There were concerns addressed in the vision plan, and there are recommendations made in the vision plan. This is the concern in the Knoll expressed in the vision plan. Until recently, mapped paper streets have led to out-of-scale infill development on wooded, topographically challenged terrain, widely used and enjoyed as open space, and created continuing pressures for such development, which threatens to dramatically alter the character of the neighborhood. That squarely fits into this very application over the long period of time that it's been in front of you. Here is the recommendation made in the village vision plan, which was adopted in 2010. Take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that the formally mapped paper streets remain off limits to development. I'm only here to say tonight, and I'll leave it at this, that regardless of who owns them now, regardless of who may own them in the future, regardless of how they may be defined and divided up, the directive to this board and to all boards in the village is to follow the vision plan. And the directive is the law. And this is what it says. Take whatever steps are necessary to ensure formally mapped paper streets remain off limits to development. That's really all I have to say, but Mr. Posen, I didn't know if we were familiar with this at all, the vision plan and this particular clause.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Well, I think it is of paramount importance that that be considered going forward. Secondly, of course, is the explanation of the demapping, which they talk about in the trustees' resolution. And the very last page talks about it. They talk about, we all know this, be it further resolved that the demapping and discontinuance of the aforementioned paper streets will, 1, benefit the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of the village. 2, ensure that the remaining undeveloped land in the village is properly protected. And 3, maintain the unique aesthetic character of the village. The writers of both of these documents, well, interestingly enough, Chairman Hunter, you helped author this,
And Mr. Lane?
as did Rob Lane.
And, right,
As-
and I just want to say, I think that what we intended, to the extent that my memory still serves me, which it doesn't, is,
That's why we wrote it down.
is that what it was anticipating was that somebody would use one of these paper streets to develop a new structure. The proposal before us doesn't change, I don't think, I don't remember. I don't believe it changes the footprint of the existing structure at all. So the question of whether or not the question of whether or not the paper streets throughout that neighborhood and elsewhere in the village might lead to various kinds of flag lot type of developments, absolutely, that was what we were thinking about. I don't think that this application, which is just about access to an existing property with a house on it that's not being changed, is a violation of that
I'm
idea of
very
the
glad
vision
you
plan.
said that, because you know what, I agree with you. some extent. So now that you brought it up, let me just read the second part of what I intended to do, and that is this. The application before you tonight is to pave a driveway. Technically, to repave a driveway to a garage that's always been in the basement of 23 Manor Place, to repave a driveway which existed in the 1930s, approximately 90 years ago, and at some point was abandoned. That's all the applicant wants to do, put back the original driveway to the original garage. I don't care one way or another whether the board approves or disapproves this application. I have only one request. If the board chooses to approve this application, I respectfully request the board to consider adding a clause to the resolution which contains language stating that this driveway may not be used for further access to a second lot.
Oh, that's nice, yeah. That makes sense.
I think we can talk about it. I don't know.
No, you don't need to.
Yeah, I have no idea if that's legal, or if we have the power to do it, or,
You don't need to.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you,
I'm
Steve.
sympathetic to the idea, but I mean, I can't respond, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard on this? Good.
Mr. Chairman,
And-
just one point of clarification with regard to the vision plan reference to paper streets. In September 2005, the Board of Trustees took action to demap the paper streets
The September resolution is what you're talking about?
of 2005.
Yeah.
Right, so that was done. Those have been demapped. It's conceivable that the action of demapping a particular paper street resulted in its automatic conveyance to the center line to either side.
That
So,
would be my contention.
right, but, so what I'm saying is, if that's the case with this particular paper street, then half of it, going down the center, now may have already been conveyed by operation of law to Mr. Pisa and to his neighbor, and the second half, perhaps to you and your neighbor, if you're across the way.
I'll give you some, okay, in spirit, you're absolutely correct. The center line of the street is
Right.
usually. I'll just give you the, let's say not in this case. My point is, regardless of who ends up with it or not, the vision plan talks about the formally mapped paper streets. It talks about it as, it's an area, it's a spot.
But what I'm suggesting, though, is that the village may not own it anymore. It's possible. I'm not saying it's definite or,
Are you saying that they are not the formally mapped paper streets?
if they are the formally mapped paper streets,
There will always be the formally mapped paper
you
streets.
can't control them if they've been conveyed to the property owners before the vision plan was even adopted. That's 2010. This demapping happened in 2005.
Right. I'm trying to follow your.
So we can't control the use of those those properties, those pieces of land.
I think the vision plan is pretty clear with what the intent.
No, but wait a minute. If this particular street was properly demapped, and because it was shown on a subdivision map, half of it went to Mr. Pisa and his neighbor, and half of it went to you and your neighbor, then if he could put a driveway on the half of it, then he doesn't even need approval from the village to do it.
Probably right, but it's still a formally mapped paper street.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean anything.
It's not
Well,
It's not-
legally owned anymore.
It's not owned by the village anymore. The village
It's
can't
owned by-
control it.
it's owned
And if
by
the
the
village has no
people.
approval authority, then it can't control what Mr. Pisa does with it. It's his land. It's the neighbor's land, half of it.
Okay, the cameras are running, and you're telling me that the vision plan, you're essentially saying the vision plan means nothing when it no longer is. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that.
Okay, what are you saying? I'm trying to understand here, but
I think what he's suggesting is our ability to act
Act.
on, and it's true of other places in the vision plan, that's the way it's always going to be, that there's always a certain, the vision plan is it's the law, but it's not all land use law, right? Some of it is ambition and intention.
Yeah. no,
And there are places where we can be more successful with that than in other places. And because of what the attorney just described, the fact that we actually don't control the disposition of that street, it's harder for us to act on the ambition of the vision plan in this case than it might be in another place.
Simple question. At some point in the near or far distant future, are you saying that the area that is now the demapped paper street is going to not be the formerly mapped paper street? It's drawn on a map now, it's taken off the map now, it's clear where it is, it's clear what this is all about. And here's the hard part, I mean, look, you know what, I guess we're not going to settle this here, okay? If it means an Article 78, it means an Article 78. And that's just the way it is. You have an obligation right now to take whatever steps are necessary now, today, now, to ensure that the formerly mapped paper streets remain off limit to development.
But as we said, in this case, the street is not, there is no contradiction, I don't believe, between what Mr. Pisa wants to do and the vision plan, I guess is what I'm saying. Creating, and you agree with that.
It restores the diagram that existed in 1930. It does, it recreates the diagram.
Right,
No
but-
net increase to anything. It recreates that diagram. The clause you would put into your resolution would simply ensure that it is all in the application.
Right, and I said I'm sympathetic to that idea, but I don't know enough to understand whether we can have the power to do that or
Yeah.
how to do that.
I think we'll take it a step at a time. I think,
And I wasn't arguing against that either, by the way.
Right, no, I know.
we'll take it a step at a time, find out
Okay.
what our lawyer learns and hear his advice, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to be heard on this? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Mr. Pisa.
So, how I'm understanding this is that whether the property reverted back to the adjoining owners or not, and it's still village owned, which from everything that I know, it's still village owned. And in fact, I had to get permission to cut down some of the trees from village officials, which indicated it didn't revert back to me. And that was in the recent past. I had to request formal permission, and they said, because it's village owned, I needed that permission, and I got those permits. And I had to obtain them because it's not my private property. So everything that's occurred over the last 3.5, 4 years is indicated it's still village owned, and that's been reinforced multiple times by village officials. And I've had to pay and get those permits and did the work only after I got those permits from village officials on this paper road. So from everything that I've done, nothing has reverted back because I was forced to get permission from village officials. So the point I'm trying to make, whether it reverted back to us, to the adjoining owners, or it's still owned, in either case, my existing driveway's been there for 70 years. I'm just paving my existing driveway. There's no, I haven't heard any objection. He doesn't know whether it was paved or not, but you know, what the board decides. He's more concerned about other items, about the development and throughout Dobbs Ferry. So what I'm asking for the board is, we can resolve that issue, whether it's owned by me or, adjoining neighbors, or it's still owned by you, and the slight technical issues that George has raised, all this is addressable. What I'm requesting of the board, if you would be kind enough, I don't think there's any huge objection. I'd like to see if we can get a vote on this, so I could at least get that moving forward, start planning in the next couple of months for when I'm gonna pave this, because I still have a lot of work to get this done. And I would like to start to use my driveway, to be quite honest. I mean, I could use it right now. It's perfectly, I would just have to put some, I would like to have a paved driveway instead of it being in the rough gravel condition it is. So I would request that maybe the board would consider that, subject to these other issues being resolved. And that's all I'm asking.
I understand.
And I would really appreciate that.
I understand.
I mean, I've done everything I can to address it, and I understand these other issues, but I would be very much appreciative if you could.
I understand. I think I don't want to go forward. I think the attorney in the next month can come up with a resolution of the issues that are of concern to him and to us, and we'll be in a position to move forward. So, thank you. Next item on our agenda is,
Do we resolve to carry over the public hearing?
Yeah.
We should adjourn it to the February meeting.
Yeah.
Do we know what date that is?
so moved. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Continue. Thank you. 189 Broadway was on our agenda. They have notified us that they will not appear at this meeting.
Like Christmas card.
By Christmas card. That's right.
Christmas card form.
Next item is 12 Irving Place, continuation of pre-submission conference for proposed new one-family residence with two-car garage. We've received a lot of information.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, just for the record, February 6th is the next meeting, so that's
Yeah.
the date.
Thursday the 6th.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Casper Carson. I'm appearing in front of this board for the second time. We met a couple months ago. We didn't have much of the drawings done for the property we purchased with my wife. We had worked on developing some drawings, and I'm here now to basically go over what we have talked about and see what the comments are.
Good, thank you. Welcome back.
So, sorry for the weird format, but that's how it shows. So, our house is basically 12 Irving Place, which is this lot over here, which is this house here. And on the previous board meeting, we were talking a little bit about the sky exposure and how the house lands against the other houses. To the best of our ability, what we have came up with some pictures of the four houses, so left and right of the property. And we basically created this elevation, which shows how the house that we would be trying to put on the lot would fit into the neighborhood. So this is the first, page of the drawings that we submitted.
It's on the last page, actually, of my sheet.
sorry.
But it's
Yeah,
great,
it's on the
it's
last,
exactly what we asked for.
So this is the survey was the new structure plotted over it. This is the island, this is the area. We're, as I mentioned, trying to face the house towards the island. We're trying to do a detached freestanding garage. It's a one-car garage with the accessory setback, accessory height. And the driveway is actually entering from Irving Street. The one unfortunate condition is that this tree that on the previous one, let me just go back.
Yeah, you call that, has to be removed. You show it on the elevation.
Yeah, this is basically, yeah, this is that tree. That tree is about 3/4 into the driveway, so I'm not sure, if that would mean removal of it, or, or the driveway basically becomes narrow and then widens up. I guess it's gonna be up to the village, to decide what we're gonna be, or what we're not gonna be allowed to do.
we like to save trees where we can.
I mean, there is, like I said, I mean, we're trying to do a one-car garage. I mean, you know, Irving, if you know, it's not a very wide street, so you have to cut, and especially on the opposite side, there is legal parking. So if you're trying to get out of this lot right now, and there is cars parked next to you, I mean, it's a little bit of a challenge. So, you know, this might be a little bit difficult, but again, whatever is required. What we have done is we have developed basically floor plans. I'm going to try to zoom in. So we are trying to do a four basically finished floors, which would be basement, first floor, second floor, and attic. Obviously, it's a wooden frame structure, so we would have to, you know, develop the whole sprinkler system to be, covering the emergency escape. But we're trying to do a five-bedroom, basically, five-bedroom house. So 4 bedrooms located on the second floor, and 1 bedroom located in the basement. What we're trying to do is, going back to the, this is the roof line, so we're trying to, I'm just going to come back to the first, so this is how the house will look on the front, and I have actually, my wife was helping me a little bit, I have here the front elevation of the house, which is definitely much better. This is how we like the front of the house to look like. We're trying to do dormers so the attic becomes, usable, and have some lights, basically have some natural light through the windows. This is basically how I'm sorry, this is the Irving side of the house. So you can see that in the front there's 3 dormers, in the back there is 1 dormer. This is the back of the house. We're trying to have 1 dormer only in the back with a large sliding door. And this is the house that faces away from Irving, which basically looks onto the neighbor, not too many windows, it just basically there was a tight clearance over there with the side back and the neighbor's house is right against it. The garage, as I mentioned before, we're trying to do accessory building, which would be, that's the best I'm going to get it. That would be a 1-car garage with basically a storage in the attic. So what we're trying to do is have the garage with a full set of staircase inside, and on the above the garage we would like to be able to store bikes and stuff like this. As I mentioned, with one car bay, there's going to be limited storage, so we're trying to have this as basically ability to hold up the bicycles or any whatever Christmas stuff and whatsoever to into the attic.
You'll need heights on that.
Yeah, and I'm going to the height. So this is basically the house. I guess I'm going to start with the front. So the village has this sky exposure, which is basically at the property line 10 feet, 45 degrees up. So obviously we're not complying with the front of the house. Looking at this is the front, this is the rear, the front of the house, the front dormer would clip. And this is basically, so it's just the front dormer on both of them and 2 sides. So I guess we would have to apply for a variance with, I guess, whatever. We have to apply it with just to, make sure that we're going to be allowed to do such a thing, or, another option.
Excuse me? You don't have to treat Irving as a front. It's a side.
Yes, it's a side.
So you only need 10 feet.
It is 10 feet.
It is 10 feet.
Okay, so on your chart, you put required Ogden front 20, and you are 20, and then you put Irving front 20, and you are 9.8. So you don't need 20, you need 10 on the Irving side, and it's a brand-new house. Why are you going 9.8? You ought to go for a variance for 0.2 feet?
No, this would be a mistake.
That's a mistake.
Okay.
This would be a mistake.
And you also indicated you need a variance for lot coverage at 27%, but you're at 27%. So
Yes, I-
make those corrections.
Yeah.
Add the heights on accessory buildings as well. And also, I thought,
And what is the maximum height on the accessory building? Is it 20
I think it's 20,
feet?
yeah.
So the
Um,
the garage.
And also, I think I asked you to show a sidewalk on Ogden.
It's a nice looking house. Yeah,
We actually like the gable ends much better than the hip roof. The hip roof, we both seen nothing like, so that's why the whole idea with the finish out it came about. There will be space, but again, it's all subject to approval. And this is,
Yeah, I think
so before we were also asking about the sidewalk, whether, as this property right here does not, Ogden is a very short street, so there is no sidewalks. I'm sorry, Irving is a very short street, there is no sidewalks. Ogden, the sidewalk ends as it approaches Irving and does not continue past Irving. So what we were asking if we could do one sidewalk on Ogden, but avoid putting sidewalk on Irving.
I would agree with that, but it's up to this board. Ogden is the most traveled, and as we try to connect the dots,
right.
these are the points where I have Irving, no. I don't-
And plus, the neighbors behind our lot, the neighbors starts to go almost to like a 4 feet
Right.
incline, so the
Yeah.
sidewalk would basically what?
Yeah, I would agree. So just show it on Ogden.
Okay, great.
I have these things happen, you have to out how unfamiliar you are with the code you're supposed to know by heart. For this structure, the garage, which is, it's very nice, it's like a little house. Did none of the sky exposure plane,
Does not say in the code that it pertains to an accessory structure.
Okay.
Because the accessory structure is allowed to be 5 feet off of the property line, so it would never work.
right, so as long as it meets the
So
height.
in our code, we have requirements for maximum height and floor area of an accessory structure, and I will review that in this plan for them.
Okay.
But they do need to show sky exposure plan for the main building.
Have you been to the Architectural Review Board yet?
No.
Okay. But that'll be helpful for you, and it'll be helpful for us, because,
So I have one other, sorry, were you about to say something, George? Oh. So, first of all, thanks for doing the elevation, which is helpful for looking at this. So, there's always this, or there's sometimes there's a dance that we do with the AHRB around the sky exposure plane. It's not really ours, we gave it to them as sort of something to look at. But I think that, I'm gonna comment anyway, and say that, I think the sky exposure, the only, in my opinion, the only one that really means anything is the one for the house that's immediate, its relationship, right, to that house. It's not, I don't think it's particularly meaningful for Irving, for the side street. And I guess I'm wondering, if you go to your sky exposure plane diagram of that front elevation, like, because I wouldn't object, I personally, doesn't bother me that the building, your dormer violates the sky exposure plane facing Ogden or Irving, but I feel like the one on the left-hand side of this elevation, maybe it's okay, but it seems to me that this is it is a corner site, and the house doesn't really respond to that particularly. It's sort of, it's just purely front-facing. In my opinion, it would be worth looking at the massing, seeing if the massing of the house could be broken up a little bit, and maybe in the process of doing that, you could mitigate some of the relationship. If you go back to your street elevation, your long street elevation, that you could mitigate some of the impact of your house to the adjacent one. I don't think it's terrible, but you do violate the sky, that's the side where the sky exposure plane is really meant to mean something. It's not so much for the street, it's more for like how you relate to your neighbor. I just wonder if the massing of the house couldn't be animated a little bit more in some way, or something done with the roof line that would soften that relationship between you and your neighbor to the south. But
You're absolutely right, and I think it's a pretty big intrusion into the plane on that side, on both sides, but that side's the
that's the
important
side
one.
that matters.
And
Irving doesn't matter so much.
I think we should send him to ARB
Yeah,
at the
that's
same
in-
time while
that's
he's
not-
going through planning to try, and let
Not
them
our
work
issue.
that out with him.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and again, this we've done it to best of our ability using Westchester maps and, the topo maps and stuff like this, but as you can see, this house, what happens is the front stoop is about 4 feet out from the driveway.
Mhm.
So they're basically used to the ground being, it's a overhang that's at 6 feet. This height is basically about 10, 11 feet to the overhang, and plus our lot instantly drops down another 4 feet down.
Right.
So our interpretation may be a little bit off, but the ground drops again.
Your measurement for the sky exposure plane is from your average grade from your property line to the corner of your house. And then you go back to the property line up 10 feet and then 45 degrees. So it's all contingent on your lot, the grades on your lot.
And there is. and
So if the next
it's-
neighbor is
we
higher,
haven't-
that doesn't really-
We haven't used like I said, a professional to do it. There is a significant drop at some point.
Well, do you have a topographical survey?
Yes, we didn't.
So you're going to have to get one of those. You're required to have that for a planning board. So you got to talk to a surveyor and get a topo.
We'll get it.
And then you'll be able to exactly show your sky exposure heights.
Well, I think we're all delighted to see you going to this step after some time. And I drove by the current house recently, and it's still there. But, no, that's fine. No, this is great.
So you're going to the AHRB
Well-
now?
Get that survey so you could make sure your heights are right, and then we'll get you on the ARB as soon as you can print out new plans with the corrected
Yeah,
limits.
yeah. And anybody else have any questions or
For us,
concerns?
I think we need the site plan at a more readable scale and pull out existing conditions onto one map and then give us a cleaner version to look at as a landscape plan showing everything. Right now,
So
you're
the two
trying
lines
to,
separate.
yeah, separate but at a larger scale.
Okay.
Good. And
Any other questions, or?
I don't think so. I would call for a public hearing at the next meeting.
Are we gonna be ready for that?
I
Will we be,
don't know.
I don't know, are we gonna be ready for that? Because
I
he's
don't
gonna
know.
go to the AHRB.
Well,
Yeah, I don't think he has,
Represent-
I don't think he has everything yet, so we should have a complete package before we call for the public
okay,
hearing.
all right,
Yeah.
So
okay.
we'll continue the pre-submission one more month, and
Okay.
we'll get them on the AHRB as soon as possible, and then we'll see if we get all the items together, and then at the next meeting, we can call for a
Okay,
public
that's
hearing.
fine.
I think that's right.
moving on. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item on our agenda, item number 4 is 156 Palisade Street, pre-submission conference for site plan review for proposed new multifamily building with basement garage.
Patty Stein Center from Gotham Design and Community Development. I'm here for 156 Palisade Street. We were before the zoning board last night. We had a good conversation, a lot of interesting issues to try and figure out. This has been revised slightly since then. There was some joking about whether I did multiple deletes, so it kind of looks like I do, but we just revised what we had last night. Based on some of those comments, and I'm giving you 3 papers that was prepared today, which I think are useful. What we gave you earlier was an evaluation of everything from Chestnut Street to Cedar Street. And what we did is focus in on the contact area, which is around our building. It's like 200 feet down the street into the corner. I didn't include the information about the properties that are on Main Street, because I think that's such a little zone, not really something to focus in. But we listed the lot areas, coverages on those. I also provided you a chart which compares the MDR1, the MDR2, the ET, and then what we're proposing, which I think puts into perspective that's in here. I forget what the third. Another thing I'll explain when we get to it. So basically, you're already familiar with this pretty well. The site that we're dealing with, this is on the zoning map. You can see how we've got the aqueduct, Main Street, Palisade Street, Cedar Street here, river down below. This is the MDR2. This is the only MDR2 that's in the village, is Palisade Street. Everything else that we changed as a village from TF to MDR is MDR1. Except for Clinton Avenue, which is MDR-H. So this is really the MDR2 zoning district. And it was created because the character of that street really is different than those other streets. They're 3-story buildings, they're buildings on 40-foot wide lots, 5,000 square foot with 6 residential units. So the feeling was we needed a special zone to maintain that street, because as was identified in the vision plan, which I was very pleased to hear expressed so highly this evening, that the vision plan talked about that it would be desirable to keep the character of Palisade Street and the fact that it brings diversity and affordability into our village. So this is actually from the vision plan. That's the Old Town map. And here are a couple of photos. I think I showed these last time. These were actually 2 photos given to me by Steve Brosnan. Here's the property right here. This is the building on the corner. This is the house that's on the street. That we're talking about tonight, 156. Here's the house next door, which I think is one of the primary concerns with the mass and the size of this. This is Palisade Street coming down further. We're just about to 75 Main at that point. So you get the character. This is a fairly developed street. You've got an assortment of different buildings, they range in size, but this is a place in the building where we have some of the higher densities that are naturally formed by 3-story buildings that are just able to have 10 apartments and things like that. Okay, so here's the chart that I've summarized in what I gave you, and the thing I want to point out in here, which I think is important to understand, is the MDR1 basically became, the TF zone became the MDR1. It was a 5,000 square foot, 2,500 square foot for a residential unit, and 27% site coverage for buildings, 54 for impervious surfaces. all the setbacks, they were all holdovers from the TF zone. The MDR2 zone was created with a much higher density, 1 unit per 800 square feet. The MDR2 also permits 3 stories, whereas MDR1 only permits 2.5 stories. But when we get to...
Where's that?
Where's which?
Where's it permit 3 stories?
Oh, I am corrected. I thought there was something in the code that said we were limited to 3 stories, and the building inspector has informed me that actually the code doesn't limit.
It's only a limit of height.
So I could do 10
There's no mention of stories.
4 feet high, but I don't think that would fly. We're proposing 3 stories, but the height is what really governs. But if you notice here, the MDR2, even though it's significantly denser, has exactly the same setbacks and coverages as the MDR1. My memory of it, and I think mine's probably, I'm like 30 or 40 years older than Rob, so the idea that I don't think I remember everything perfectly either, but my memory was that we were rushed at the end of that because the MDR2 came at the very last end, and what we actually sent in was something that said to be determined in that, and they didn't want to have to be determined on a chart, so they just duplicated those. I think these numbers need to be figured out, and at your last meeting, you actually talked about that, which I think is a good thing. This is the DT zoning district, which is a transitional zone, which in a way the MDR2 is also a transitional zone. And what you see in the DT, which also permits the similar heights, it has much higher coverage, 60% for buildings, 80% for impervious. The study we've done of the neighborhood, those would probably be too high for this neighborhood, or higher than we would want them to be, but I think it's closer to the direction of what would be an appropriate limitation in the code. But as I said, we're before the zoning board at this point, and we'll see, whether this board wants to do it, the board of trustees wants to get involved, or if we end up going for variances on it. What we did since last night is we assessed the buildings that are in that context, which right now the prevailing is 41.41% is the site coverage of buildings right now. So that's the average in that, from the corner down to the large, kind of brownish brick painted recently down the street. So what we're looking for right now is 46.68, which actually kind of fits into that. In fact, what I did is I said, if we built at 46.68 on that lot, how would this number change? And it actually didn't get to 42%. So it indicated to me that it's kind of like we're right in that kind of mean size. So this size does not affect, the perception within, those other lots.
What would be the current coverage of the lot, of the house that's there?
It's probably something like 16, 17%. We can check that, but it's a small two-family house on one of the largest lots in the neighborhood. This lot is 8,675 square feet. There are other lots in the neighborhood that are less than 4,000. So, and the typical, when the code was being looked at for MDR2, the typical model for what we were trying to figure out was a 40-foot wide lot, 120 feet deep. So, 5,000 square foot lot. Actually, I'm gonna do it. No, that's right, 5,000 square foot lot with a rectangle on it with 5 foot, 5 foot, 5 foot in front, 25 in back. With, at that point, what it would be is 54% site coverage. That would be, say, a building with 2 apartments on the floor, 1,200 square foot per apartment, with a little bit of common area, 3 stories, you get your 6 units, which at 800 square feet and 5,000 square feet, that all works out. So I think that's kind of a model that was put together, and I've provided that to you tonight. This was what we submitted to you earlier. This is that context limit area. These are the ones that are up on Main Street that we didn't include in that calculation. And this is what I gave to you tonight. Here's a streetscape coming down. So the building we're proposing is larger than the other buildings. I have to figure out what we have to do to make it compliant with height. Building inspector let me know today that actually the way we've drawn this in the back, this would not be compliant, but I think if we have these coming down with a cricket in there, I think that would be, we'd be okay with the height on this. We're showing 38 feet, where 40 is permitted.
It's the measurement that's a problem, not the height. So 40 is permitted for a peaked roof.
Right. The
For-
midpoint of the,
Right. You don't have a peaked roof.
if these are, if you think 75 Main, and you've got a gable here and a gable there, so this is the ridge of the gable, then our heights are correct. And we have to do a drawing that shows that. I'm not ready for that at this point. But we have to bring it in compliant with it. I'm not interested in trying to go for a variance on height in this. I think that would be a non-starter. So our goal will be to bring this into compliance. At the last meeting, there were some comments. Actually, I'll do this first. This is that diagram that represents what I just said, 40 feet by 120 feet. This would be, two 1,200 square foot units, which is not big, not small, with, I think, 300 square feet of common area, staircase, and an entrance, with 5-foot side yards, 5 foot in the front, 25 in the back. But that's 54% site coverage, which is kind of consistent with a lot of the other buildings that we see on that street. Right now, with 27%, what you'd be able to build on that same lot would be a 1,350 square foot lot, building, which would be one apartment, 3 floors, so it's inconsistent with the idea that this permits 800 square feet to be an apartment. At that point, so, something that should change one direction or the other. But I think there's reasons that we want additional residential units in this area. Here are some pictures of the street, which I think you probably know enough, I won't spend time on it. That's the existing house. This is the house next door, 3 stories above, almost 4-story. These are 2 houses on one parcel, and as you note here, many of the houses on the street are close in. Some of these houses, as the chair was talking about before the meeting started, this building, they don't look large from the front, but they go very deep. One of the differences between those sites and this site is that these sites come back to a very tall retaining wall in the back. The site that we're working at, 156, actually has a relatively high backyard, about 10 feet higher than the street, which, as was testified last night by a neighbor, a very desirable backyard. So keeping that and having that not be affected by this is a potential objective that we should be looking at. One of the discussions at the last meeting was making that be a parking area. I think that would be unfortunate. It would also be kind of hard to have to ramp up to it and all. But you get these driveways coming in on the side of a building as part of the character in it, and that's kind of where we've gone at this point. This is just coming back up the street on the other side. Here's the lot, which was also commented last night. If we have this lot, why don't we just put the parking there? But Mr. Hennessy also said we need the parking on the individual lots. So at the last meeting, this is what we showed. We had the driveway coming in the middle of the building, which you guys did not like a lot. So you made comments. You wanted us to reduce the width of the building, eliminate the driveway facing the street, and consider parking in the rear via a driveway on the south side of the building. So that's kind of what we took a look at. So what we've got now is the front entrance coming in the center building, the driveway on the side, coming down, but instead of driving back and putting parking back here, we've kept the basement parking. So we've got the 8 parking spaces located in the foundation of the building, and this foundation is effectively grade along this side and along that side. That's how high this yard goes up. So while we appear to be a elevation facing the street on this side, and a lot of it's exposed there, the reality is that this is actually, you'll be able to walk right out from the first floor of the building above this onto the backyard. In fact, we're actually cutting down a little bit to be able to get in. These are just plans, I don't think we need to go over it. Right now, what we're showing is 4 1-bedrooms on the first floor, 2 2-bedrooms on the second floor, 2 2-bedrooms on the third floor. So a total of 8 residential units. And a street, this kind of contextually, the elevation working in the space on both sides. This is the side of the building with the garage door. This is actually kind of down in the ground, so we've actually excavated this out to create that, so it helps keep it hidden, which I think is beneficial. And as we've identified, there are at least 6 variances that we need for this, although the 6th, which is the on-site parking, we're required to have 11 spaces. We are providing 8. You have the ability to make decisions about doing that in a different way, either with curbside parking or with pileups. It doesn't make sense to me that we would get a variance for that. If you're gonna let us do it, at least, sorry, have us pay for it. And I did find out there was a question about the height of the building today, so we'll address that, but my goal is to keep that off. We're also, if we can do some of these others to take them off the list, I think that would be good. We'll see what we could adjust to it. The 2 real main ones are increasing the building coverage and the site coverage. Well, the site coverage really isn't that bad, 54% to 62.87. Understanding that that 54 is for that MDR1 zone. We have not done an analysis of the other parcels, but some of them are effectively, they're close to 100% paved. So I don't think we'd be standing out unusually with that. Now, someone who's working for me but from Florida, so I didn't get to see this quickly enough. They did a SketchUp actually in Google Earth, which is pretty sexy because you can actually see it contextually with all the other buildings around. And if I had my computer that could do it, I'd actually be able to panel around on this. But what I noticed today when I was looking at it more carefully, here's the sidewalk, and here's the sidewalk. So I think they've got this maybe 20% larger than it actually is. I think if they get it in scale, we're not moving the sidewalk, so I think they have to move that back in because what they've got here doesn't stick out further than it should. They've got the yard in the back. It's just showing that this building is much bigger than it should be. So I think that's something we'll get corrected and be able to show you better at the next meeting. Again, that's showing that. Same thing, here's the sidewalk, here's the sidewalk. So if you shrink this down so that that lines up, this becomes smaller. The other view of it, we then did do a regular SketchUp.
It looks bigger because
Which
it's
I can
raised
show tonight,
now. It's
but
showing
just so if
front
we don't want to take time for it, just some quick,
So the overhang.
shots from it.
It's a-
Corner building, what we're proposing, building next door, the building down the block.
From that
From
sky.
front, you
you're
see
looking
that
at
you've got
this
decent
part of it.
space
So
on
it's an
both
illusion.
sides.
Right,
I also want to point out what we've tried to do in this is reduce the apparent mass of this by doing balconies or decks on the sides so that the front that's actually solid is narrower. We're also looking right now, can we do something that caps this
Makes it more clear.
at this floor level and sinks this back in, which if we take that idea of the top floor recessing back 10 feet that we have in Main Street, might be a way to reduce the apparent scale of this and make it fit in better. So that's something that we're looking at, this shot, and then looking at this up the street. And then just, I think, 2 more slides or 3. This is from the vision plan, and the main things, one is using pileups instead of having additional parking. I know there's some support for that on the board. And encouraging a significant increase in the number of residential units in Old Town. I think that's something that we really need to be focused on. I haven't heard anything yet from Donna's committee, the Affordable Housing Committee, but I think that's something that, cares about these kinds of things. And I actually went back because we adopted a climate action plan last year. And one of the things that it calls for in the action plan is encouraging development of residential units to promote affordability, diversity, and make more efficient use of existing infrastructure, mass transit, while also preserving open space. And environmentally sensitive or valuable lands. This is walking to the train station, walking to the downtown. It seems to me to be a very good place to be increasing the number of residential units. And there's a lot of support for that in Westchester's housing needs assessment, which I think is a really well-written document that everybody should take a careful look at. And that's all I need to present, so if you have any questions, if you want to call for approval,
No, we,
Could you go back to your slide of the context, the one that you handed out to us in hard copy, the long elevation and the bigger ground plans? Yeah.
Yep. I gave you the copies of the process.
there certainly are a lot of unique buildings on that street, both architecturally and size-wise and everything else.
I have a general comment.
But it just seems to me that even though this wouldn't be the largest building on the street, there are some that even have exceeded these expectations. And I agree that it's good to have additional housing in the downtown. I don't see any particular reason why this has to be the building that solves that issue. If you just look at this, the ones you've got up there.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can make it look like anything else because every building there is different. I mean, the building that you were involved with a while back, a single-family house,
Yeah.
large addition. I mean, that's the unique kinds of things that can be done here where you retain the size of the building from a streetscape point of view. And then you do something in the back that changes the use of the building and everything. I think this is, a step too far from my point of view.
The challenge with approaching anything like that on this lot is what we do with parking. If we aren't required to have on-site parking, we have a lot more flexibility in how things can be done.
Well, if you have fewer units, you have more
If we have
flexibility
fewer
too.
units, then we have fewer units, and that fails to succeed at about 3 or 4 needs that the village has. And I don't think that, when you look at our needs in terms of tax base, places for people to live, all of the support for the activity in the downtown, all of those things call for having more residential units. We have not grown as a village. You know, in fact, we were 11,093 in 2015, and we're right now at around 10,800 something. So we're not a rapidly expanding community. In 1970, we were 10,363.
Hard to know where all those people are. There aren't a lot of empty houses around.
There aren't, but that's...
I think it's a question of,
Yeah.
it goes in waves in the number of children in the house. It's really the thing that changes, although the school population stays pretty level.
Well, that's actually, it's interesting you say that, because Tuesday night, the demographer was here for the school district, and they're looking at a very interesting change, which is that we finally, with the increase in taxes that have gone up so dramatically on those single-family homes with like 4 or 5 bedrooms, the people who have been living in those, aging in those, are now looking at it and saying, it makes no sense for me to stay in this house. So they're selling, and the statistic I gave was, in 2015, we had 10 projects we did in Dobbs Ferry, single-family renovation. Of the 10, 2 of them had school-aged children. Last year, we did 10 in Dobbs Ferry. 8 of them had school-aged children already, and the other 2 are planning on having kids. So they're buying those houses with those 3 and 4 bedrooms, 5 bedrooms. So we're seeing an increase right now in the school district. What we're not addressing right now is if we spend some time over at Pace, what we hear is a really big driving need, which is we're not creating more places with 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms. The places that, 68% of the village households are 1 or 2 people. So, being able to provide the housing that addresses those in a walkable area, that uses the downtown, the train station, I think that's an objective we should have. I think that's something that helps our resilience and our sustainability.
Let's talk about the project, because I I understand the larger kind of context for this, but first of all, you know, nobody does a more thorough, I just want to thank you in the sense that nobody does a more thorough presentation of context and massing than you do. I appreciate it. You certainly, but I think the sheet that you handed out to us, which is in that kind of spirit, shows the problem, which is, and let's not talk about the code thing, because there will be, in order for do something contextually here, there will have to be, if we don't change the zoning, there will have to be, if we want to do the most contextual building in the world here, that was a fraction of the size of this, we'd still have to get all kinds of variances, because I agree, it's not aligned properly with this context, which is very hard to do since the context is wonderful and also crazy and inconsistent.
Yeah.
But the presentation on the sheet, I just think shows very clearly that the structure is like an order of magnitude, either whether it's in fact or just in its appearance, like an order of magnitude bigger than everything else on the street. And so I think that my question to you is, what is it that you want from, in terms of trying to move this forward? And other board members can speak. I mean, for me, it's just too big. I mean, that's like the scientific way of saying it. So I don't know, like, what you want to do in terms of going forward. Are you prepared to? How much more input do you need from us besides me telling you that I think it looks? Some of it may be massing. And maybe some of it can be changed that way. I think there is a height issue. I understand from your memo, you're not counting the base, you're counting the basement as a basement.
Right.
Technically, but the reality is,
You see it.
it's a story from the street. So how do you want to go forward with this?
Well, there's two things. One of them is, if we knew what you felt was the appropriate site coverage to have.
I don't think it's a cover, I think you're right that the coverage numbers in the zoning, like I think the coverage numbers in the zoning and the setbacks and so on aren't going to align with something that would work here. I agree with you there. So I think focusing on one zoning parameter is not the thing, right? Because in the end, it's going to be like the intersection of a bunch of things. The flexibility around the parking, how much we want to do with that, how aggressive we want to be with these various massing things. So I don't think it's necessary to focus on, for us to give you a number to hit in terms of coverage or any of those things. I think you need to sort of show us something that is, looks more in scale with the rest of the context.
Okay, I mean, that's something we can.
And I don't know how to do, and I just have to say, to be honest about it, I think, in my mind, it's probably a story lower, at least, and does something else with the massing to break up the sort of the format, the ground floor and the presentation of it to the street, which is just, it's so different than everything else on the street. And as you point out, there are ways that other buildings have actually created a huge amount of density, which you don't necessarily see from the street, which is sort of an accidental, brilliant thing that kind of happened over time. Yours doesn't do that. Yours looks like your building presents to the street it doesn't, it's big.
While we've reduced the building width by maybe 12 feet from last time we were here, in width, I understand what you're saying. At the same time, if I take this red dot and put it the other direction, these units are all looking at the river. And being able to get units facing the river is something that we've put as a goal.
That's another, again, Patty, there's no one, these are really there's no one parameter that's a driver, including the things in the vision plan, which are about, I agree, getting more housing in the downtown it's not about optimizing any one of those things, right? It's about
Putting one-
finding the intersection in a synthetic way of all those things and ending up with something that is in scale. And it's just, and I'm sure it's gonna be on the bigger side of the spectrum, and that's fine, but it's just too big. I don't know how else to say it, and its
Yeah.
presentation is too big.
Well, I'm trying to give a presentation that accurately represents.
You do, and I compliment you. There's no, we certainly, when you present, we certainly understand from all the stuff you present, the three-dimensional models and the elevations, better than any other project that comes before us. We understand what we're getting. And so I'm telling you, what we're getting is too big.
So, what I'm wondering, I mean, one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, talking about, is if this kind of caps at this level, so it's kind of more, it feels more like it's the height of that, and it pushes back further.
It's,
Whether that goes in the backyard further, I don't know. It might just be that the units upstairs get smaller. The building just gets, the mass becomes less. Is that a direction, is that the kind of
I
thing
don't
you
know.
think we should do?
I'm reluctant to do that because I know what'll happen, which is
Trying to trap
a
it.
month later, right, you'll come back and you'll say, Rob, you said it would be good if we pushed this back, and here it is, and it still doesn't look right. I don't know, so I'm not gonna tell, I don't know what the answer is. I just know because there's probably a million ways to do it.
yeah.
And I don't know what the right way is.
Right.
I think that, I'm sorry, Rob.
No.
No, I think it's frustrating for me because I think Palisade Street, it displays a variety of historic homes and buildings that if they have a certain rhythm when you walk down the street and a quality to them due to their construction, their historic value, the uses of each building. And I feel that this new construction, that we should offer, that the new construction should complement that existing experience and kind of set a precedent for what our future buildings should be in this area. And personally, I would like to see this building become the precedent for something beautiful and interesting and that contributes to the character of this street and the continuity of the neighborhood. And it's a challenge, it's a challenge for the architect or designer to be able to have that insight and to create a structure that complies with the rules that are set forth from the village and everything else, and to preserve the quality of life for the people that live in this neighborhood, that are on either side of you, that have, a home here. And I agree. I feel this structure is really massive. I feel it's too tall. I feel like the pushing back of the sides for the balcony actually, accents how massive that block is there, And I feel like this building is designed to meet the maximum space for profit. Like, it's not about actually a vision plan.
It's not forgetting those other things, it's trying to find that intersection. And I haven't said, I think this is it, we're there.
But it's about profit. I mean, for me, when I look at the mass and how much you're trying to cram in there, that's kind of what it's saying to me. I don't feel like if I walk down that street, I'm gonna be like, oh wow, this is so comforting, it just blends in and it's something that I want to do. I walk by buildings and look at the details on buildings and I'm like, wow, this is really, interesting. This is really cool. I appreciate architecture and I don't feel like that's what it's giving us. And as far as the parking, I do have a problem with that. I feel like if we're building a new building in our area, we should accommodate the parking. We shouldn't be relying on a PLOP program as an option when we have new construction, because parking is a problem here, and I experience it every day. And parking should be accommodated within a new project, in my opinion. So I'm just putting it out there.
I mean, to me, 8 on-site parking spaces, every unit having a parking space, I think is the proper balance. Letting the parking, because we did see a change in the code in the last couple of years, to increase actually the parking required. Getting it to where you're doing those additional spaces, I just think pushes the size, pushes everything that is the other concerns that you have. If we weren't providing all of the 8 spaces here, we could probably do something that was smaller. You know, we could tuck things in better, maybe we might still be able to do so.
But we're building now for future also, so it's like, if you want to use the parking lot across the street, well, what happens when, you know, we need that parking lot for our community to park there? You know, now all of a
This is
sudden.
part of that community.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a residence also. I mean, when you have people coming here to visit, you're trying to bring people in, you're trying to bring foot traffic through here, and you want to make this more of a historic, you know, pleasurable route to the train station. I have to be honest with you, I don't walk down Palisade to go to the train station. I walk down, straight down, because, you know, it's kind of out of the way. But if we made it nice, yeah, maybe I would walk down there, you know? And this particular building just is not nice. I hate to say it, but it's not.
And there was no increase in the parking in this district. The mixed-use building
Right.
was increased to match this one,
Right,
1 plus a quarter per bedroom.
right.
This wasn't changed.
I agree. I wasn't implying that this was, the most recent change in the village was to increase parking, not decrease. We were kind of going in a direction of decreasing, and then it kind of came back up a little bit with that one, basically the downtown district.
Mhm.
So I'm aware that there's this ebb and flow. You guys didn't get the thing that I wrote, but I will send it to you in case you want to read it. Not required, obviously, but what we're looking at, we don't actually think there is a parking problem. We think there's more of a walking problem. And
Well, you're wrong.
Well, I don't know, I mean, I'll say, this is, so I don't, you know, I happen, I
I
don't.
experienced it, so I know.
Right, that may be, but I'm on the side of sort of parking forgiveness. But I'm trying to, the problem you have is that we're not all of a mind. And I know that, on the parking issue, and I know that presumably it's gonna be, I don't know where, I know that in looking at the potential reexamination that's being considered, parking, looking at the downtown parking as a issue, including looking at it under a sort of projected build-out kind of scenario, where you would sort of look at the future and you'd look at, well, how many sites, you know, what's a reasonable assumption about how many future sites, like the ones on the north side of Cedar, might ultimately be developed and so on, that you would try to get an idea about,
More parking there.
a better idea about how much parking you need now and in the future.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that study.
we
So I don't know what to tell you. I guess you won't get necessarily clear direction on the parking. You could, again, offer up, alternatives that made different assumptions about how much parking or how many units. If you go Steve's route, it's sort of like, well, if you have less units, you need less parking. That's also true. I understand that the building is less profitable for the developer under those circumstances.
But I
So-
think the applicant can request 1 space per unit, and to me, it seems it could be considered. It's not insane, it has a certain logic to it. So, and I don't think the discussion should focus so much on parking, but how to take the bulk of the building as presented, which is not desirable. It does not seem to work with the rest of the buildings. It's wonderful to have such diversity of building shapes and sizes,
Yeah.
but the width of it, so a couple of very bad thoughts possibly is, I think, we would like to, I would like to see almost what would look like 2 buildings,
Yeah.
narrower. It could be done different ways. Show the big, the one with the, where the whole thing is projecting out. Your last slide. I think.
Okay, because I think you and I are on the same wavelength on this. I mean, these are 2 houses. One's a single family, one's a two-family, on the same parcel. And I'm not suggesting that this is how we would do it by having 2 discordant, but a possibility might be if this ends up feeling like it's more two buildings with a divide. You know, maybe half of it sits back, porch depth or something, and the other feels like it's different, and it breaks it down, because what I think is driving, I mean, the statement that was made earlier, I think was exactly right, which is that it might be proportional, but that ends up with it being too big. And the reason for that is that it is an 8,675 square foot lot. If you have a 4,000 square foot lot that's 50% site coverage, and you have a 8,006, that's 40%, the 40% is still gonna be much bigger than the other.
And that's why we have a sliding scale in the residential districts
Right.
well, because the lot's twice as big, doesn't mean you get to build a house that's twice as big.
Correct.
But back to the, if you could put back up the question I had for you to look at is if that was sort of flipped so that the projected portion of the building was recessed, and maybe the widths would change.
So you have a corner and a corner, and
Yeah,
then
and
this sets back in.
Yeah, bring those out to, I think your, at least appearance of, and the degree to which it's set back would make a major difference on it, but if it's set back 10 feet, for instance, you would have two narrower facing structures, so
Right.
they'd be tied together. That would be one way to do it. You were talking
I
about.
mean, if we look at this,
Yeah, yes.
I mean, this building is the same with that building, but this building is broken down and massive.
Right.
So if you look at it frontally, it looks the same, but the reality is it's
Same
the way it
width,
breaks it down.
No, it's not, it's half that building.
So obviously, there's that kind of idea to be used here. The thing I'm not really happy with what happened at 75 Main. I thought what this board recommended approval for was much better than where it ended up. And that's because it wasn't a symmetrically deposed building. Where it ended up with the two gables, everything matched, everything was balanced, it still feels like it's just one big thing. So I think part of it would be not maybe doing one here and having it be symmetrical, but actually maybe favoring the way that the view opens up where the light comes from, so you'd have something here, and you'd have something that stepped in, and then maybe something else that stepped in again, so you felt like it was two separate.
Yeah, that's my suggestion, and, I mean, you could do like what would appear to be a duplex, and you're on a slope, so it's almost like two buildings, townhouse buildings. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, they're attached together, so it's one building. That would at least deal with the width issue and to some degree the massing of it. But I'd like to play with insetting the central part of that to kind of pull out, to see if that, and then the height probably is too big no matter what. So those would be the pieces of information I would.
You think that the height is too big in numbers, or in the way it presents itself in the street?
I would want you to try the inset solution to see what it looked like. But the height of the building next door on this side, the far side, that side is fine, the smaller building, that has to be looked at.
Well, maybe, I mean, the conversation we're having is similar to the good conversation we had about 75. And that was, it was the reverse of this. Let's bring the mass to the corner, turn the corner with a road on the other side. And maybe the reverse of that, with this side of roads, so that it doesn't feel like it's grabbing that one as much. And if we needed to at that point, we could slide back. I don't want to change the parking, but sliding back a little bit into the yard to make up for it. That might be what we do. The property is a little bit irregular, we shape it back. At the same time, the person who lives on the third floor here, I've been to the apartment, she showed me her views. And right now, the way we've got it designed is when you look out her back window, you still see the backyard. You don't see the building. So that's something I've kind of indicated, we would try to keep that. But it might still be viable to do that.
And I'm not sure how to deal with the quote basement. I mean, it's really, it needs attention.
Can I jump on that for a second? So first, I support all the comments except for the parking from my fellow board members, and I don't disagree with all of them. But I do think one of the factors is that bottom floor, the floor that faces the street, where the parking is going to go behind the little vestibule and stairway, doesn't match anything else on the street. All the other entrances are welcoming, and that really,
This entrance.
that's really awful. So, that's all I'm gonna say, okay? Maybe we could do a little better with that?
I'm sure I mean, this is a diagram still, so I think that makes perfect sense. Particularly if things, I mean, this is all set up a bit doggedly symmetrical. So if we change that, then obviously, maybe this evolves in some interesting way. What we've got here, I mean, there's an existing retaining wall. And so what we've done is we've kept, we would rebuild it, but that's what we've kept there. So the retaining wall you have along the street is the one that's there, and then the building sets back from that. If we set back another 8 inches, the front of this portion would be in plane with the existing house.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into the design options with you on that. I just think if you look down this very nicely set up streetscape that you've shown here, every one of these entrances feels welcoming. And that really feels like, I'm in Queens with bars on the window. Okay, so that's,
Is that a negative?
it doesn't fit the neighborhood.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Well, there are other things we can do
Can you
too.
imagine
We'll
walking
make
into
it
this
look however
building,
you
how
want.
cold it
We
is?
just need to know which direction we can
You
go
walk in
inside.
the staircase.
We're not
As
gonna
the
decide
zoning
it.
board, as well as
It's
this
like
board
walking into
tonight,
an institution.
agrees that the site coverage is out of whack. So we just need to know where we can go with it, and we'll design it however we want. But we just need to know what size we can get.
It's too big.
I don't think,
And I don't
it's
think
not,
this
like
is
I
a
said,
case
it's
of
not
either.
us giving you a
What happens
number
if a car's
for
coming out,
coverage or
they're
height or
really
anything else and you're
perfecting
hitting that
it.
number. That's not the way this works. You're not there yet. It's too big. That's, and I don't really feel like, I don't know that we need to say more than that, to be honest with you. I feel like you need to, there are a million ways to do this site. And I think that there's no point in us getting into a thing, I mean, I appreciate Dwight offering his suggestion and so on, but I mean, I feel like I think there's very clear direction from this board that it's too big.
Well, if you can throw one extra word in there, it appears to be too big for the neighborhood, as we say. As opposed to the too big quickly becomes a matter of math. I think what you're saying is, if there was 10,000 square feet more in this building that looked half the size, you wouldn't care. It's the way it looks and the way it addresses the street and relates to its neighbors.
You see, that's the problem, though, with asking the board to design it.
We're not.
I know you're not, but you're saying, well, if you're saying it's too big, we don't know how to deal with that, or you're saying it's too big, so that means mass is okay? I mean, you can't presume that if the board says one thing, that like a million other options were dismissed, so.
Just a little bit background on this real quick. When we started with the massing here was where we got forced to go on 2 previous projects. Where we had a very massing that broke it down in scale. We were pushed very hard to get away from that and to make it as symmetrical and plain as we could.
Patty, please, let's not go there. Let's not
But
go
that's
like,
what that, I mean.
I don't remember anymore. I don't know what the history of the other projects is, and it doesn't really matter. It
It's
really
what's gonna
doesn't
go.
matter.
Well, this is unique, this street is
This
unique.
is such an, right, this is a
It's very-
completely
I mean-
oddball
All
condition.
unique.
Yeah, well,
And
they're
I
all
think the board
unique.
did a good job, and they got treated wrong, and I think that's an unfortunate thing. And because it affected the quality of the projects that got built, and I get blamed for it, but what if we've been able to build what we came in early? So we started this as clean and plainer as we were directed to make the others. I have no problem trying to make this down, I think it's a great idea. I think it's the direction I would like to go. And I think that's a good suggestion. It sounds like there's some support for looking at that. That's all I'm not trying to say.
There's support at this point for looking at anything that makes the building
Well, I'm trying to have my
address
client
the
have
street.
enthusiasm too. So there's a,
It feels like it fits into the neighborhood. This is like an alien landing in the neighborhood.
Well, a couple of the buildings in the neighborhood have that.
Well,
So we just-
but let's not, don't
And don't focus on
Don't
that
build
side.
on that. I mean, it's really a unique neighborhood. It's got terrifically interesting buildings. There may be a lot of things wrong with them structurally and
I
really.
think it's, I mean, this,
But those are interesting. You build two like that, I don't care.
I think they're very interesting. I mean, these, I don't think would fly if we showed them to you in drawings.
No,
I don't think you'd embrace it.
those aren't the best examples, but they don't jump out at you. They sort of just sit in the background. They're, so.
Yeah. I mean, these are.
That's a very plain building, but it fits the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And that.
That is character.
Now, is this,
Don't emulate
the
that.
difference you were talking about?
I don't think you need to copy what's there. I think you need to think about how you can take those inspirations and those, details and create something that,
Absorb that context and
and create something that's, unique, but also can possibly set a precedent for future development.
I'm gonna stay away from the precedent setting, because I get yelled at all the time that everything I'm doing is setting precedent. So
No,
what
what-
I'm gonna do is try and, for the one building that you like.
Or make it fit in,
Right.
make it fit into the
Right.
neighborhood, but have some character and detail to it, that, it's not so blaring big and massive and
Well,
tall.
one
And
thing we have going for us here, and Donna, don't be offended by it, this is a building that you approved. This does not go from here to the Board of Trustees. So, in fairness, I shouldn't have started with what I was able to get approved in the other board, because you guys always were supportive of the more very broken building that had interesting things happen. So we can simply, I'll sketch that too. So we'll work on that and hopefully come back to the next meeting showing you something that you don't hate as much.
Okay,
Is that fair, Dan?
that's a good,
something that they're gonna like, Patty?
Well, if I said that, Dan would say that I'm pushing too hard and expecting too much of the board. So we'll work forward to try and come back, because we do want to move this quickly, and we're not looking to do an endless study, so it puts the responsibility on us to come up with something that answers the ideas that stretch from Dwight to Laura and still gets past Ed.
sorry.
goodbye.
Any other comments, or you're good?
No, I think we're done. Good.
Shall we adjourn?
I think we adjourn. Is there a
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.